We talk about what caught our attention, stories we forgot to tell, and ways that we saw the Holy Spirit moving among us.
Good morning.
Good morning, friends.
I am not Phil Dickey today. I'm somebody else.
Yeah.
How is everybody doing?
That's how I feel today. Just kidding. It's Monday. It's fine. Just wanted to keep the tradition going.
It is Monday.
Mitchell, you're having a really Monday.
Real Monday.
Today's Mitchell's birthday.
Yeah.
And it's a Monday of all Mondays.
Yep. The plumber's coming. The car's going in the shop. The dog's going to the vet. Cash is losing his mind about his new primary classroom at the Liberated Montessori School. Shout out.
Nice.
They're great.
You know, it's
I have a good cup of cultivar coffee.
Well, there you go.
And they got the maple lattes out. So I got Eli one of those.
That sounds delicious.
Latte for the 9-month pregnant woman at home. So, yeah, if you like fall coffee drinks, cultivar is where it's at.
I have to try that. So as far as the pumpkin spice craze goes, I love pumpkin in my baked goods. Pumpkin bread, muffins,
pumpkin bars,
scones. Yeah, all about that. But I'm not a huge fan of pumpkin in my drinks.
No?
So I always go for like a maple or a cinnamon or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not a big pumpkin spice guy. I did try the cherry pie milk at the state fair. It wasn't good.
I'm really shocker.
It's real surprising.
Yeah.
I've been to the Texas State Fair a total of one time, and I have to say it was, well, I don't ride roller coasters or do rides or anything because I get so motion sick. So really, the corny dog was delicious, and that's about all I can say about the State Fair.
Which now you can get it like Golden Chick or something, right?
Right.
Is it Golden Chick?
Yeah.
I think it's Golden Chick.
I'm going to probably tell you the quality's not going to be there, but what?
You think a pop-up stand is going to be any different than Golden Chick?
Yeah, dude, for sure. I don't want to get into the techniques of corn dog making.
That's for another podcast.
Yeah.
Join
us later this week for corny dogs.
Mitchell has a lot of hot sports opinions about fair food, but yes, I guarantee you that at the state fair, a fresh Fletcher's corny dog out of that stand is going to be better than the drive-through Golden Chick.
That's probably true.
Okay. Anyway, fair talk. We can do that at another day. We got a lot to cover. We had a fantastic Sneaky Good Sunday yesterday, World Communion Sunday. If you missed it, you can check out our worship service on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And on our Facebook page.
Facebook Live, yep.
And you can catch my sermon on this podcast channel. And
on Wednesday. It'll be up on Wednesday.
Rebecca and some awesome volunteers distributed World Communion kits that had stickers, variety of breads. It was that whatever bread I had in communion was awesome. I don't know what that was, Rebecca, but
that was naan. That was
a really good piece of naan.
Yeah, that was toasted. I think it was toasted buttered or something like that.
Yeah, it was not cold naan like that, but it was awesome. It was great.
So Becky Stillwell and Keith and a couple other people delivered a lot of the bags to some of our folks who really can't get out and about very much.
Right.
Or if they can, they're just not comfortable because of the pandemic. And I thought that was probably the most important thing that those kits did was provide that human connection for those folks. I mean, Keith and that team of like Senior Adult Ministries probably gave out about 20 bags to our folks in the congregation who really aren't out and about. So, and we got a really sweet message from one of them saying like, "Thank you so much. I opened up this bag. I just felt connected for the first time in months." And I think that's exactly what communion is about, right? It's very simple. It's like bread and juice, right? It's whatever. It's what you feed your toddlers every day, but it's so important and connective.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think I said that in my sermon. Like, we don't need to overcomplicate it because there's the holy mystery aspect of what happens at communion.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's just tactile. And I think this is gets into that middle hymn, Rebecca, like middle
Yeah.
hymn on Sunday, right? This idea of taste and see. Like
Mhm.
that's not how we come normally to understand God, by tasting.
Right.
So it's a psalm, right? Psalm,
Psalm 34.
34. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, which Lisa brought out for us. Like she read the psalm first, and then right after that, we sang the hymn. Which there are multiple ways to do that. That hymn actually has chanted verses, so you actually
Yeah.
could have that as the reading in between those little refrains. But I decided that because we can't share space, we just have to share time. You know, it wouldn't have worked as well if we had cut back and forth multiple times. But yeah, I mean, taste and see the goodness of the Lord. I mean, the Psalms actually have, like, we talked about this a lot. They have such rich theology that we often overlook because it also has such problematic theology sometimes. But if we think of it as, I always say this, like, think of the Psalms as journal entries. Think of the Psalms as like somebody's poetry book that we happen to get our hands on.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, I loved the way that brought out, that you actually like referenced that in your sermon, this taste and see that God is good.
This idea that the Psalms are like journal entries, I think, is really important. I was having a conversation with one of our neighbors last week in the garden, and he's a Black man in America, and I think we all know that, you know, that's really a hard experience right now. Certainly has been a hard experience, and we're talking about his faith and his spirituality, and he said, you know, I feel angry, and like I feel guilty that I feel angry, and I'm like, dude, like take your anger to God.
Yeah.
Like totally appropriate. And if there's a place in scripture that we can really feel emboldened to do that, given permission to do that, it's how we read the Psalms. And and what a powerful like way to think about that book, because I always give it a hard time as like boring and out of touch. But there are aspects of the Psalms that I think can really open up ourselves, our ability to experience God, and this idea of like tasting and seeing is just, I think it's really a fascinating way to think about our spiritual development.
So Walter Brueggemann writes extensively about the Psalms, and this is a shameless plug too, just for the book club, because I'm going to talk really good about Walter Brueggemann, because that's our next book we're reading. Not specifically about the Psalms, but he actually does talk about the Psalms in the book we're reading. But he talks about it being a process of orientation, disorientation, and reorientation throughout the whole book of the Psalms.
Yeah.
And the brilliance of it is that you never know from one to the next what you're going to get. Mm-hmm. And he said he loves that because it's just like life. You don't know from moment to moment or day to day what the next day is going to hold. So when you finish one psalm that may have been one that helped really reorient you, the next one may really disorient you. Mm-hmm. And then it's this constant, perpetual cycle of that orientation, disorientation, reorientation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's important. And even within the same Psalms, right? I
mean, totally.
Which I resonate with, because I journal daily. I try to journal like in the morning and in the evening. And it is remarkable. Like I will start out, you know, God, here's everything that went wrong today. I'm so annoyed. I'm so grouchy. And then by the end, I feel God nudging me like, hey, write something down you're thankful for. You know, how are you going to transform this energy? Or vice versa. I come to the journal kind of with a neutral feeling, and then something is brought up and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to work through this, you know? Mm-hmm. So I really feel that. And I think, Mitchell, you, in your sermon, you also kind of gave us permission to do that, like to hold the tension between coming to the table and seeing it as a mystery, but also sort of explaining what we'll experience there. So like it's a mixed bag. We're always going to come to the table sometimes feeling great, and sometimes like, do I even want to be here? Do I even think it's worth it? You know?
Yeah. And I think that's part of community too, is like the days we feel great, it feels easy to like kind of glide through and be a part of community. The days we feel horrible and don't want to be present are also days where like our presence probably matters, not only to ourselves, but to others. And so I think it's really important to recognize that and we say this often. I stole it from our bishop because he said it to the ordinated class. But like, regardless of how you feel about it on any given day, like you're still required to do the work. And I think that he was saying that to a bunch of preachers, like regardless of how you feel about it, like your job's infinitely more important than that.
Yeah.
I think that's how it is with community too, though. Like, regardless of how we feel in the moment, we're to note it and we can share it, but we still have to show up. And communion is that broad place where we pull ourselves up to the table, and we can do that if we're grumpy or happy or grieving or checked out or however. But the goal isn't to necessarily feel the right thing; it's to be present, and that has its roots all the way back to that Last Supper that Jesus had with his disciples. I mean, think about all the different emotions that would have been present that night. You had Judas in there, probably everyone staring at him, like trying to figure out if he's the one. Jesus being all cryptic and also very specific at the same time, and like they're all over the place. I imagine trying to figure out what's next, and that's
Sure.
a good reminder for us as we struggle forward in community.
Well, and it was a true meal too, right? I mean,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so I
Which
think
is
it's,
unfortunate that we don't have a full meal, as
yeah.
communion, but yeah, it's a full meal.
I think that's something that when Josh was able to do simple church, dinner church, which is not possible
Mhm.
right now, they encased the meal with communion. You start with bread. It's almost like an appetizer course. And then you
Right.
eat a full meal together. You share, whatever they would have shared, herbs and lamb and vegetables. And
Yeah.
then you close it, you bookend it with the other element. So, I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
a good reminder, like you said, Mitchell, I don't know if y'all know Jim Gaffigan's humor. But
I do
he has a bit about like everything we do is oriented around food. He's like, hey, after we go eat something, we should go eat something, And so
Right. Yeah.
this idea that everything in our lives, especially the best things, are oriented around food.
Right.
We
Right.
bring, when we can see each other, we bring cookies to celebrate somebody's birthday. We bring a casserole to help someone who's grieving or who just was in an accident or, can't cook for themselves. So I just think that's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then food has a way of like creating moments too, right? We can stumble upon these experiences like, you're going to meet someone for lunch, right? And all of a sudden the food that's put in front of you is like way better than you thought, right? And all of a sudden it creates a marker. So not only is it like a companion piece, it can become like the center of what's happening.
Yeah.
And I think like that's, I miss that. I miss going and sitting with folks at restaurants.
Yeah.
When you said at the beginning of your sermon, you said communion is powerful because the shared meals are powerful. And I started thinking like, oh, I wonder what the shared meals are in our past that have been really impactful. Or do y'all have one that, or like when I started thinking about mine wasn't just one specific one, but we used to have Sunday night dinners every
Right.
week. And like my grandparents lived like next door to us. And so they would usually be there. And at least one of my aunts would often be there. And like I played, sports in high school. And so there was not many nights during the week we were actually home just because there was a lot of things happening. So I always really appreciated those. And even when I went to college like 30, 45 minutes away from where I'm from. And so I would bring all my roommates back home for Sunday night dinner. And
Yeah.
That's awesome.
oh, it was so fun, which, some of them were friends that I'd grown up with anyway, but other ones were from St. Louis or Kansas City. And we would just all go out to the farm, and we would either, if it was in the fall, we'd like watch football or something. And then we'd have big dinner and my mom and dad loved it, right? Like they loved having people in their house. And it was always just this really fun experience to kind of get out of the college craziness and go back home and share this dinner. And we always had a great time doing it.
Right.
I love that. I think, so many things were coming up for me. But the two that really came forward, one was that my mom was a music minister. She's retired now, but she, as we all know, had meetings all the time. And so especially Sunday evening, like Sunday was
Right.
just a 12 or 14-hour day for her. So my dad would always make breakfast for dinner on Sunday evening, and she would come home and we would share like pancakes and bacon and sausage. And like, that was a really special kind of shared time,
Mhm.
even though mom was tired from a full work day. Like that was our family time. And the other one that I was thinking was one of my roommates in college, who's still a good friend of mine, Lubaina. She is Muslim, and so she would invite all of us, her roommates, to celebrate Eid with her at the end of the month. She would cook this incredible food and like invite friends over, and we would celebrate with her. And I just felt so welcomed into her. Like she would cook, recipes that her mom had, and she would teach us how to eat. Like, no, you really don't need to use a fork. You need to use the bread as like a scooper. And it was even more delicious when I was like experiencing that culture.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one like a very specific meal was also as Rebecca had mentioned, like I broke fast iftar on Ramadan in Jordan with my friend Andy, and we had planned this trip. For 4 months we were gone. We totally forgot that it was Ramadan, and so we were really, really hungry. And just we were in a huge tent, probably 4,000 men and women, and we were invited into this experience, and I remember that being really powerful. Saturday morning breakfast at my grandmother's house was always a big deal when I spent the night as a kid. Her biscuits and gravy and
Oh man, that
I
sounds
love
good.
good
honey
biscuits and
butter,
gravy.
and she would give me coffee and five. It's like 1/5
She gave you
coffee,
coffee at age 5.
1/5 coffee, and like 4/5 milk. But it was great. And then one of the meals that stands out. Eli and I were in Montreal, and just some of the food that we were able to experience there was just really incredible, and so it's weird thinking about these meals, right? Because in some ways they're planned, right? Sunday night dinner, but I think that there's also this like creativity and kind of these moments that just arise, and we're not even aware of it, right? We'd have no idea that we were gonna like break fast with 4,000 of our closest Muslim friends, and I think that's the power of the sacrament and the church, is that like while it is scheduled, it's on the calendar, there are still moments where folks for the first time, maybe in a long time, are visiting, and all of a sudden the table's like open to them. And I think like the openness in which we invite people to the table makes such a difference in what happens in our worship service. And that's why I'm a huge advocate, and I know Rebecca is too, for having communion as often as possible,
Yeah.
because there's no replicating that experience. You can't get it any other way, right? You have to go through the sacrament to have that experience. And I want more communion in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
Literally and
theologically,
figuratively.
right?
Yeah, totally.
I think one of the reasons I love communion every Sunday too is that I think theologically it's really a great, like that's the culmination then, right? And nothing against you or any preacher,
Oh.
right? But like rather than the spoken word being the kind of the climax of the service, like you end with, or at least it builds to the shared meal together. And I think to me that's a really powerful. I just think we've got so focused on the intellectual aspect of worship and of our
Yeah.
theologies and everything, and there's something about the breaking down and having a meal together and saying the same or almost the exact same liturgy every Sunday that it may seem repetitive, but there's something holy in that repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not dependent on one specific person and delivering this knocked it out of the park kind of sermon thing, but it's
Yeah, I would say, too, it having communion every Sunday takes the pressure off the preacher,
absolutely,
right? Because you can preach the worst sermon in the world.
yeah,
It's what happens. There is always going to be communion. And if that's like the only reason we gather to celebrate with one another around that table, like that's a good day, right? Like,
yeah.
and I think like it's just a much healthier way of looking at worship is when we end together at a table.
Yeah.
So I wanted to live up to our description of this podcast and give you all a little bit of a nerdy kind of history. One of the things that came forth to me yesterday was this balance that we can strike between holy mystery and also explaining enough that you do you're grounded in what's going on,
Right.
and breaking down kind of the responses that we say in the liturgy and why we say them, to remember the past, present, and future. Phil, you said you didn't know this story when I told you earlier. When a lot of people think the pastor has to say these magic words to bless the elements. And it is true that there are words that, in our Methodist tradition that we honor that just the elder says. But fun fact, that is where hocus pocus came from. It's fake Latin. So in the early days of the church, the priest would be, I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume the priest would be mumbling, right? Because they do it every day and every week. So they'd be mumbling to get through the Latin words, and nobody spoke Latin usually. And when the priest says, this is my body, which the real Latin is hoc est corpus meum, people hearing that, they heard hocus pocus, he's casting a spell or turning the elements into Jesus's flesh and blood. So I just think that's really interesting for us to know as we balance this holy mystery, this Magnum Mysterium, with knowing our history and knowing some of the things that go into it. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no magic that happens, right, over the elements. But you're right. Historically, we've required an elder to be present and to preside over the table. And I think I think we'll see the end of that in the next decade.
You think so?
Yeah. I think it's unsustainable. But the reason, right, historically, the reason is because elders had the power to convene community. And the fear has always been that if anyone can preside over the table, then that means that the table can become a non-communal exercise where closed Sunday school groups will celebrate the Lord's Supper, or just UMW will have the Lord's Supper. And the Lord's Supper was never intended to be something that was ever closed. And so by ensuring that an elder presides over the table, it allows us to ensure that as many people are invited to the table as possible. And I think it's really, because there's nothing magical about being ordained, right? And we're just set aside. We're set apart. We're not set above or below. We're just kind of set over here to the side to do very specific tasks on behalf of the church. But when I was ordained, I didn't get any magic powers. Phil didn't either.
You don't know me.
Ordained as a deacon. They don't get anything, right?
Right. I don't even have the power to.
You don't even have power, right? But
I think that's a good word, Mitchell. Though is I think a lot of people, and maybe we can cover this if we do a Methodism 101 class. A lot of people do think that having the elder have to be present is a limiting factor. So hearing you say that actually historically it was meant to be an opening factor and an equalizing factor, I think is really important to hear.
Right, because circuit riders were bouncing around all over the place. Chances are they were only going to be present once a month in these communities, and when the elder showed up, worship attendance probably boosted, right? Because the preacher was there, right? And so what we know is that just by the elder being present, that's when other things happened. Letters were read from the denomination, or there were opportunities to baptize folks, or right. So you kind of had this buildup around this Sunday. It wasn't anything special about the elder. It was all just about this is how we've organized ourselves, that we will celebrate together when we can all be together. And but yeah, I get the limiting. It is very limiting, and we know it was a pain, and it will be a pain. It'll be less of pain because we have more elders on staff. But when I'm on paternity leave, it's just kind of how do you solve that? And is there anything, theologically different about me than Rebecca presiding over the table? No. Just that our historical denominational stance has been that elders must be present to preside. And I like to take the affirmative reason for that is because like we ensure that the table is open and everyone's present.
I think that's a good word. Yeah.
Mhm.
I also liked the reminder when you said, remember the past, remember the present, remember the future, which is really, I wrote down what you said.
Like the most confusing thing ever.
Yeah. I think you said, remember to remember the future. And I was like, okay, my brain just exploded just then. You have to remember what you know about the future.
Right.
But this, this remembering, you talking about making sure the table is open to everybody.
Right.
We fall away, right? Especially now, it's so easy to feel disconnected from our communities. So the remembering can be very physical too. When someone's in church for the first time in a long time and they get to come to the table, we sing a song. We didn't sing it yesterday, but we sing a song called "Come to the Table of Grace." This is God's table. It's not yours or mine. Come to the table of grace. So yeah, I was struck by that language as well. We remember each other as part of one single body.
Yeah. The idea of being like stitched back together, like I can't get that. Like that's how I think about it. And we're going to be stitched back together after we've been apart for a while, and we're going to be put back together for this moment as the body, and then we'll dismember ourselves. But ultimately, this process of being kind of out in the world and then coming back, out in the world and then coming back, like it shapes us and it informs us, right? And so, what's the hymn we sing? Not to get all clergy here, but a clergy session, we sing, "Are we yet alive?" Right?
And are we yet alive? Yeah.
Yeah. Every time we gather, and it's not the best hymn, but it has power because that's what we do when we gather. In that hymn, it was written for clergy, right? That we would be all doing the work, and then once a year we'd gather together. In some ways, like we should think about communion in the same way. Like we go out into the world, we're sent out into the world, and then we come back and we're stitched back together. And we're going to look different. We're going to think differently. We're going to have different experiences. We're going to have, some of us are going to be grieving more than we were last time. Some of us are going to be happier than we were last time. But the act of communion stitches us together as a reminder that regardless of where we are bound together to do this work, and that we are the body of Christ, and that we are all redeemed, and we're all loved, and we all have what we need to go out back into the world and do the work. And yeah, I like this idea of remembering as a present active verb and action for the church.
And interestingly, that tune, I was looking it up because I couldn't remember the tune name. The tune name is Dennis, which I don't know why, but it's the same tune that we sing for "Blessed Be the Tie That Binds," interestingly. So if we're talking about remembering, that's the same tune.
Interesting.
Yep.
Huh. There you go.
There you go. It was a good Sunday.
Chucky Wesley wrote those words.
Chucky Wesley. Good old Chucky. This is very Halloween-esque.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Where Halloween.
Halloween's gonna be weird.
It's gonna be real weird.
Are y'all doing the PVC pipe slide to give candy out? I've seen this in a lot of different write-ups.
You mentioned it yesterday. I had not heard this. This might be a good idea. Maybe I'll get on the roof or something, like drop candy down.
Yeah, totally.
Our neighborhood said to just line your sidewalk with candy, which I'm like, yeah, cool. So the first kid that walks by,
that's a very honorable way to approach Halloween, but
right.
I feel like if you line the sidewalk, but then if you're sitting out in your front yard, kind of like distanced.
Hey, don't do that. Don't pick up 3.
Smack their hands with a very long stick.
that sticky hand, you just throw it out there and hit them with it.
You could use the little sticky snakes that Victoria gave out in her back to school.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, are y'all excited about our next series?
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Totally.
It's I realized that we have the Trinitarian thing going on for our titles recently. We had bread, water, and wine. Now we have earn, save, give.
It's true. Oh, you know, one thing we need to talk about is that we had a couple people in worship yesterday that were in the Sunday sit down, and we failed to introduce them in worship. But Lisa Tishner, who is the mother of Taylor Tishner, who is very active in the folk band and
the choir.
In the choir as well. So she joined us as a board member of Africa University, and then also the Reverend Dr. Peter Maggetto joined us from. He was in, where did he say he was in Kenya, right? Yeah. So
I thought Nairobi, but I could be wrong.
Isn't Nairobi in Kenya?
Oh yeah.
Nairobi, Kenya? Yeah.
It's
funny because I had to think through my head as well. Me and geography, y'all, is not good.
Same.
But so he actually is the deputy vice chancellor at Africa University. And so I thought he was going to be in Zimbabwe, but he had told me he was back in Kenya. That's where his family is. He wasn't with them for 8 months during the pandemic, which is just terrible.
Yeah,
so he
that's
finally
awful.
got a chance to go back. And so he said he'll be in Kenya for probably a couple more weeks before he has to head back to Zimbabwe again. But just a really cool. I love that for World Communion Sunday, we got to have Peter present with us on Sunday morning, which was a really cool opportunity, and have him be a part of worship as well. And I think I loved the conversation we had too in the sit down, which you can also find in our podcast channel.
What day do you drop that one? Tuesdays, right?
No, it dropped. I tried to drop it Sunday night.
Sunday night.
I had issues with our recording, and so for some reason I'm very echoey in this recording. So just forgive that. But it actually dropped early this morning.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. I think we often, at least I often, forget about the more far-reaching arms of the United Methodist Church and our global impact through places like Africa University is just remarkable. It was great to hear Lisa get so excited, and her poetry.
Oh my gosh,
that's great. One of the words she rhymed with, I was like, "Daggum, that's a difficult word to rhyme with."
Definitely.
What was it?
We'll find the poem.
Yeah, we'll post it.
She didn't give it to me. I need to get it though, and I should put it in the show links or something like that because it was a really great poem.
It was great.
Yeah. So anyway, I just loved it. I love that we got to have them on the Sunday sit down, and then they were a part of worship too. I like that you got to do that, Rebecca. That you pulled that all together. So great job.
Yeah. So the last 3 weeks we've done that. We've had our guests from the Sunday sit down also appear in worship for some continuity.
Yeah, which is just awesome. So yeah, again, sneaky good. Great Sunday.
Sneaky good. All right, friends. We will catch up with y'all next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a great day.
You're listening to a podcast recorded at White Rock United Methodist Church in the heart of East Dallas. For more information, you can find us at wrumc.org. And make sure you stay subscribed to this channel to stay up to date with all of our content.